You ever wonder what a Russian-developed Half-Life game in Unreal Engine might look like? Me neither, but here it is anyway. It's called VLADiK BRUTAL, and it's an incredible homage to one of gaming's most legendary franchises, complete with train rides through massive underground facilities, overzealous scientists conducting potentially world-ending experiments, a crowbar, zombies, and the eggs from Alien? Because why not, I guess. Let's dive into this wonderfully nostalgic game. So, Narco Games, which is a Russian game development company run by one guy, has been releasing games since 2017. Most of them appear to be riffs of existing franchises like Hotline Miami and Dark Souls, but this year he launched VLADiK BRUTAL. It's basically Half-Life 1 and 2 reimagined as a Russian horror game in Unreal Engine 4, and frankly, it slaps. And clearly, I'm not the only one who thinks so. It's garnered a very positive review score on Steam. And just like Half-Life, it's a mostly linear, story-driven game with lots of combat, tons of creepy hallways, jump scares, and the occasional trips through the streets and towns of a besieged Russia. Now, the game starts you off simple enough with an introduction to your character Vlad and a friend of his. They're prisoners, and the quote-unquote work that they're doing is assisting scientists in a massive underground facility. You want to make sure that you have subtitles on for this one because the game is fully voice acted in Russian. And while you're making sure that your game is set up correctly, take a gander at the insanely extensive graphics options menu. Everything in this is categorized by system impact, and there's even a pro section with stuff that I honestly don't think any gamer should have access to. It's kind of awesome, and it's a great example of indie devs doing things better than AAA games could ever do. The devs know which options affect performance the most, so having that info communicated directly in the menu just makes sense, rather than me needing to go look at some sort of YouTube optimization guide. Also, there's ray tracing, if you really want it. Anyway, after a short car ride through this city, you descend to the depths of this underground lab. This is basically the Black Mesa your mom says that we have at home. There's even two scientists talking about playing Half-Life 1 and how dumb the scientists were in that game. And then naturally you walk into a room with a giant reactor, flip some switches, and basically cause a resonance cascade that rips a rift through the interdimensional space, unleashing a zombie infestation on Earth that can only be stopped by one man with a crowbar. Vlad, of course. The rest of the game is an escalating series of shootouts with zombies, monster soldiers, humanoid robot guards, and freaky-deaky bosses that instantly kill you if you make a single mistake. Oh, and of course, ladders that launch you into oblivion and make you fall to your death if you look at them funny. Now, despite the similarities to Half-Life and other franchises, including basically just a copy and paste job of the eggs from the Alien movies, VLADiK BRUTAL's gameplay is actually really fun and doesn't feel like a boring retread of familiar experiences. Every gun aside from the starting pistol turns enemies into meat piñatas. It's sort of like mixing retro shooter aesthetics into the late 90s, early 2000s gameplay stuff. It's a fun vibe. There's also a neat effect that feels ripped pretty much from Fear, where shooting an enemy indoors with a big enough gun will splatter their blood on the walls and ceiling, and it'll actually drip down like a blood sprinkler. The shotguns in particular just make enemies explode, and it's genuinely satisfying to just stand in one spot and annihilate a room full of enemies with a pump action. Plus, you get a sawed-off double barrel, which is even more devastating. Rounding out the roster of weapons are classics like a Magnum, AK-47, and AS-Val, a very BFG 9000-like experimental gun that shoots a mini black hole, and many others. And honestly, it's a good thing that all these guns pack a punch, because the amount of jump scares in this game is kind of insane. I feel like this developer really loved that mission in Stalker where you first run into a bloodsucker in an underground facility, because every other encounter throws a bunch of enemies at you, and just when you think you've cleared the room, something will sneak up behind you and start wailing. Ah, just when you need a hand. Well, this looks like a nice room. Ah, why? Every freaking room, man. And it's funny because even watching the clips of this game back, it probably looks a bit janky and low budget because, well, frankly it is. But for being made by one guy, it's crazy how atmospheric and genuinely frightened these sections of the game are. The environmental storytelling and sound design, while not AAA level, are still composed together so effectively that I am fully immersed in the horror experience. The interior sections being so tense and methodically paced also benefit the outdoor transitions nicely. As soon as you step outside, you breathe a sigh of relief, and the game lets you kind of go full ballistic against enemies in broad daylight. These areas feel a little bit more like Half-Life 2, although maybe a little bit less measured, with combat being faster paced and more frantic. And that's not to say that the game is easy in any way or not frustrating. We'll get to some of the janky stuff in a second, but it is quite impressive just how well paced the game is. That's something that not a lot of devs get right. Now, jank-wise, the game has ladders that throw you over a ledge and kill you with fall damage, or that are just hard to get on in general, making you question every nudge of your WASD keys while you're trying to get down from an elevated position. There seems to be some interesting stuff like inconsistent scripted events. One of the on-rails train sections spawns tons of monsters that drop in from the ceiling or spawn in closets to either side of the track, and it just felt impossible to beat due to the sheer number of enemies. Then on one of the tries, the game decided to spawn like 1/3 of the enemies it had on the previous attempts, and I just breezed through it like it was nothing. And while it could have been scripted to make it easier when you try it a certain number of times, I don't think that's what was happening here. I just think there was some janky stuff going on. Also, the lip sync in general, character animations and cutscenes or dialogues is, well, whatever this is. The closer you look, the jankier the game feels. But at the same time, the game doesn't emphasize its visuals more than it needs to, and the jank sort of becomes part of the charm. And frankly, it's impressive that a solo dev even attempted to make a game with lip syncing and whatnot. Truly though, the core appeal of VLADiK BRUTAL is the action and environmental storytelling, and it does this very well. It's a passion project cooked up by a very talented dev, which means we get a lot of fun throwback nostalgia trips and just some generally well-crafted gameplay. It's certainly piggybacking off the same ideas that made Half-Life games great, but it's also injecting enough of its own style to be new and interesting to play. And while I haven't finished the game yet, the more I play, the more impressive the game gets, and I can't wait to finish it. What do you guys think? Does a Russian Half-Life clone intrigue you? Have you played it already? If so, let me know in the comments. And while you're at it, be sure to give me a like if you enjoyed this video, subscribe to catch the next one, and ding that notification bell to beat the YouTube algorithm with me. Up next, check out this video on Half-Life Alyx, one of the best games ever, but played without the VR headset. Is it still worthwhile? Check it out. As always, guys, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. This is Level Cap, signing off.